She stepped off that train with $4 in her pocket and nothing but a wrinkled newspaper ad for a cook's job. Her husband had just died, leaving her not with memories of love, but with $800 of gambling debt she never knew existed. The creditors took everything: her home, her furniture, even her wedding ring, which she sold just to buy a ticket to Kansas. And when she finally arrived at Brennan Creek Ranch, the owner looked her dead in the eyes and said one word: no. But Clara Whitmore wasn't asking for charity. She was offering him a deal he couldn't refuse. What happened next? She didn't just cook his meals. She uncovered a betrayal that had been draining his ranch for years. She faced down the most dangerous man from her past, and she made that cold, broken rancher feel something he swore he'd never feel again. This is the story of a woman who lost everything and built an empire from the ashes. Sometimes rock bottom isn't the end. It's the foundation. When you stop running from your past and start running toward your future, that's when everything changes. What this story offers you: a reminder that your worst chapter doesn't define your whole story, that starting over at any age isn't weakness, it's courage, and that the right partnership can heal wounds you thought would never close. If this story speaks to your heart, let me know in the comments. Have you ever had to start completely over? Drop a like if you believe in second chances, and subscribe so you never miss a story that reminds you just how strong you really are. The train screamed into Brooks Station, and Clara stepped out into a furnace. After 3 days rattling on the rails, the Kansas heat felt like a slap in the face. The town was just a dusty road and a few buildings squinting under the sun. This was it, the place she would either start over or die trying. A young fella, maybe 16, asked about her luggage. When she held up her one small suitcase, he gave her a look she'd come to know well: pity. She walked right past him. Her entire future rested on $4 and a wrinkled newspaper ad for a cook. She found the general store, a cool, dark place smelling of canvas and coffee. Behind the counter stood a woman with hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, and eyes that could chip stone. "I'm here about the cooking job," Clara said, "at the Brennan Creek Ranch." The woman's eyebrows shot up. "Honey, that advertisement is 3 months old." "He's been through 4 cooks since then," the woman said. "None of them last more than a couple of weeks. You got a husband?" "No." "Where are you from?" "Philadelphia." "You're a long way from home." "I don't have a home anymore." The woman, Martha Jenkins, studied her for a moment. "Look, Jake Brennan is a fair man, but he won't hire a woman on her own. Too many cowboys, too much gossip." "Then I will have to change his mind," Clara said simply. Martha laughed, a sound with no kindness in it. "Honey, Jake hasn't changed his mind about anything since his wife died 8 years ago. You can't just—" "How do I get there?" Clara interrupted, her voice level. The laughing stopped. Martha saw the steel in her eyes. "Supply wagon heads out in an hour. Ask for old Pete." At the door, Clara turned back. "I'm not running from anything, Mrs. Jenkins. I'm running towards something." Old Pete was a quiet, weathered man who helped her onto the wagon without asking a single question. They rode out onto the endless prairie, a rippling sea of grass under a huge, lonely sky. "Heard you're aiming to be the new cook," Pete finally rumbled. "Jake's a good man, but he's hard." "I can handle hard," she replied. He gave her a sideways look. "What brought you out here?" For the first time in months, she told the plain truth. "My husband passed, left me with his debts. They took everything. I sold my ring to get here and start fresh. Kansas," she finished, "was as far as $4 would take me." Pete nodded slowly. "Jake will respect that. He started with nothing, too." "What happened to his wife?" Clara asked softly. "Fever took her 8 years ago," Pete said. "He's been a ghost ever since, just works himself to the bone. The whole ranch is paying the price for his grief." Before long, the ranch appeared on the horizon. It was a big operation, with a two-story house, a huge barn, and a bunkhouse. And there, in the main corral, a tall man moved with a horse so confident he looked like part of the landscape. That had to be Jake Brennan. As the wagon got closer, the man in the corral looked up, his gaze sharp and steady. "That's him," Pete said quietly. A kind-faced older gentleman came out from the barn to meet them. "Pete, who's this?" "She's here about the cook's job," Pete answered. The man introduced himself as Hector Morales, the head wrangler. He shook Clara's hand firmly. "Ma'am, I have to warn you. We've had 4 cooks quit this spring. The work is tough, the boys are rough, and the boss—" Hector glanced toward the corral. "He's the toughest of all." "I'm not looking for easy," Clara said. "I'm looking for work." Hector nodded slowly. "Then you better go talk to him yourself." Clara climbed down, brushed the dust from her dress, and walked toward the corral fence. Jake Brennan stood watching her, perfectly still. Up close, she saw the lines of sun and loss etched around his eyes. He did not smile. "Mr. Brennan, my name is Clara Whitmore. I'm here about the cook position." He sized her up like a man inspecting a horse he didn't plan to buy. "That position is filled." "No, it is not," she said, her voice steady as a rock. "Mrs. Jenkins in town says you can't keep a cook for more than 2 weeks. His eyes narrowed. "This ranch is no place for a lone woman. My reputation is a luxury I cannot afford, Mr. Brennan. I'm a widow with $4 in my pocket. Gossip doesn't much scare me." His jaw tightened. "Where are you from?" "Philadelphia. My husband died 6 months back. Left me with $800 of debt. I sold my wedding ring to get here. I need this job." "And you," she said, holding his gaze, "need a cook who won't quit on you." The silence between them felt as big as the prairie. Finally, he spoke one word. "No." The word was a blow, but she didn't so much as blink. "Give me 1 meal," she demanded. "Tonight. If your men don't like my cooking, I'll walk away at dawn. But if they do," she stepped closer, "you give me a fair chance." He started to say he had no time, but she cut him off. "You have time to hire another cook who will quit? You have time for your men to eat bad food? I am not asking for charity, Mr. Brennan. I am offering you a solution. Myself. Just 1 meal, that is all I ask." From somewhere behind them, Hector's voice cut in. "Boss, why not let her try? What is the worst that could happen?" Jake shot Hector a look that could sour fresh milk. But when he turned back to Clara, something in his face changed. It was not softness, but maybe a flicker of curiosity. "1 meal," he said flatly. "Supper is at 6. 15 men plus me. The cookhouse is out back. You will find what you need there." He paused for a moment. "If my men do not like it, you are gone before the sun comes up." "Fair enough. Hector will show you the way." Without another word, Jake turned back to his horse. Clara watched that hard, unbending man who had just given her a chance he clearly did not want to. Then she followed Hector, ready to cook for her life. The cookhouse was a complete disaster. Clara stood in the doorway, her heart sinking. Dirty pots were stacked high in the corners and spoiled food was rotting in barrels. A thick layer of grease covered every single surface. "Good heavens," Clara whispered. Hector appeared right behind her. The last cook was not exactly a tidy person. The last cook should have been run out of town. A short laugh escaped Hector before he could stop it. "I like your spirit, Mrs. Whitmore. Please, just Clara." "Clara." Hector leaned on the doorframe. "You truly believe you can fix this mess by 6 o'clock?" Clara looked at the chaos. 4 hours. 15 hungry ranch hands, 1 chance. "Get me some help," she said. "I need someone young who can follow directions and is not afraid of hard work." Hector grinned wide. "I have got just the boy for you." 20 minutes later, a skinny young man stood in the doorway. He looked about 19, all long arms and legs with a friendly face. "Ma'am, Hector said you could use a hand." "What is your name?" "Billy Dawson, ma'am." Well, Billy, how do you feel about scrubbing some pots? Billy's face fell a little, but he nodded. If that is what you need, ma'am. Good. Start with that pile over there. Clara pointed to the mountain of blackened pots. Scrub them until you can see your face in them. For the next 2 hours, Clara worked like a storm. She threw out the spoiled food, scrubbed every counter and shelf, and organized the pantry. She found beef, potatoes, onions, flour, and coffee. It was basic, but it was enough. Billy worked right alongside her, scrubbing until his hands were red, never once complaining. He seemed eager to do a good job, which reminded Clara of her own younger brothers. Billy, she said while chopping onions, just how bad is the food around here normally? Billy thought for a second. You want the honest answer? Always. It is awful, ma'am. The last fella could not make a decent biscuit to save his life. The meat was usually raw on the inside and burned black on the outside. And the coffee, it tasted like dirt. He lowered his voice. A few of the hands have been getting real sick. Clara stopped chopping. Sick in what way? Stomach pains. The doctor in town figured it was from the food, but the boss could not find anyone else to hire. Clara pictured Jake Brennan trying to run this ranch while his men were suffering from bad cooking. She understood that kind of stubborn pride. She went back to cooking with a new fire in her belly. By 5:30, the cookhouse smelled wonderful. Clara had made a rich beef stew with the meat so tender it fell apart. A pan of fresh golden biscuits sat cooling on the counter, and a pot of strong, proper coffee was brewing on the stove. She had even found some canned peaches and made a simple cobbler for dessert. Billy stood near the door, just staring at the food. Ma'am, he said quietly, that is the best thing I have smelled in my entire life. Let us just hope the others feel the same way. Clara wiped her hands on her apron. The tables were clean with real plates instead of old tin ones. At exactly 6 o'clock, the doors swung open. The cowboys came in one after another. 15 men, young and old, all of them dusty and tired from a long day's work. They were expecting the usual terrible meal. But then they stopped smelling the air. One by one, they looked around in surprise. Clara stood by the stove, her heart hammering in her chest. Hector came in last, with Jake Brennan right behind him. Jake's eyes took in the clean room, but his face showed nothing. Gentlemen, Clara said, her voice clear and strong, supper is ready, but I expect you to wash your hands before you sit at my table. There are wash basins by the door. For a moment, there was dead silence. Then an older cowboy with a big mustache let out a laugh. Well, I will be. The lady wants us to wash up. I like her. Already. The ice was broken. The men moved to the wash basins, talking and joking. Clara caught Hector's eye, and he gave her a little nod. She started serving up the stew and biscuits and pouring coffee. At first, the room was quiet except for the sound of spoons hitting the bowls. Then Billy spoke up. This is the best stew I have ever had. Murmurs of agreement went around the table. One man actually closed his eyes like he was in heaven. The older cowboy raised his coffee cup to her. Ma'am, wherever you came from, you are an answer to a prayer. A warmth spread through Clara's chest, but she did not let it show. Not yet. She looked over at Jake Brennan. He was still standing by the door, watching her with those hard-to-read eyes. He walked to the head of the table, sat down, and picked up his spoon. The whole room went quiet. Jake took a bite of the stew. He chewed it slowly. Then he swallowed. His face did not change at all. More coffee, he said. Clara poured it for him, her hands steady as a rock. He ate the rest of his meal without a word. When he was done, he stood up. Miss Whitmore. Clara looked right at him. Yes, Mr. Brennan, the job is yours. $30 a month. You can have the cabin behind the cookhouse. He paused. Breakfast is at 5, lunch is at noon, and supper is at 6. Any questions? A small smile finally touched Clara's lips. I will need to make a list of supplies for the next trip into town. And I would like to get the old vegetable garden growing again. Something flickered in Jake's eyes then. Maybe it was surprise, or even a little bit of respect. Make your list. Get whatever you need. Then he walked out. Hector came up to her, grinning. Welcome to Brennan Creek, Clara. Clara looked around at the happy cowboys and the empty plates. "Thank you, Hector," she said. "I think I am going to like it here." That night, Clara sat in her own small cabin. It was not much, just a bed, a table, and a stove, but it was hers. For the first time in 6 long months, she had a home. She took out her mother's old cookbook and held it close. On the first page, her mother had written a message years ago. "For my Clara, may you always find the place where you belong." Tears stung her eyes, but she would not let them fall. She had done it. She had a roof over her head and a real job, but as she got ready for bed, she saw a small desk in the corner with a pen and some paper. She thought about Jake Brennan with his hard eyes and the way he ran his ranch. She had seen the messy account books in his office when she walked by. This ranch needed help, and not just in the kitchen. Clara sat down at that desk and started to write. She was not writing a letter. She was making a plan. If Jake Brennan thought she was only there to cook his meals, he was in for a big surprise. Clara Whitmore had not come all this way just to make biscuits. She was going to save this whole ranch. Jake Brennan might not have wanted her help, but 2 weeks was all it took for Clara to start changing things. She was up before the sun, making coffee while the Kansas sky was still full of stars. By 5, a real breakfast was on the table, the kind that sticks to a man's ribs. The cowboys stopped complaining and started showing up early. But Clara saw more that needed fixing. The chicken coop was a disaster, with hens getting out and varmints getting in. She grabbed some tools and went to work in the blistering heat. Jake found her there at sundown, hammer in hand. "What in the world are you doing?" he demanded. "Fixing your coop," she said, not stopping. "I didn't hire you for that." "Well, it's hard to cook eggs when critters are eating them all." She hammered another nail straight. "This place ain't been touched in years." Jake's jaw went tight. "That's not your concern. Anything that affects my kitchen is my concern." She finally turned to face him, his expression closed off as always. But his eyes showed a flicker of something else. "Got something to say, Mr. Brennan?" "You're overstepping your bounds." "I'm being practical." Clara put the hammer down. "Your coop is falling apart, your garden is all weeds, and your pantry looks like a tornado hit it. From what I can see, your account books are just as bad." Jake stood there, stiff as a board. Clara knew she was pushing it. She'd spent 10 long years keeping her mouth shut for her late husband Edmund, watching everything crumble. She was done with that. "I'm not trying to run your ranch," she said, her voice softer now. "I just see problems you're too busy to see. Let me help." The air was thick with unspoken words. At last, Jake spoke. "Just stay out of my office." He turned and walked off, leaving Clara with a burning frustration. Stubborn, proud man. She picked up her hammer and got back to it. The next morning, Hector found her on her cabin porch with a cookbook in her lap. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. Clara nodded. "Jake told me what happened," Hector said, lighting up a smoke. "I'm sure he did. He ain't mad. He's just spooked." "Spooked by me?" "He's scared of needing anybody," Hector explained. "When his Lizzie passed, a part of him went with her. He built walls around himself so high nobody could climb them. He works himself to the bone so he doesn't have to think about her." "I'm not trying to replace his wife," Clara said quietly. "I know that child, and deep down so does he. But Jake's forgotten how to let somebody in." Hector gave her a knowing look. "You just give him some time. He'll come around." "And if he don't," Hector smiled, "keep on pushing. That man needs someone who won't back down from him." That Sunday, Clara rode into Brook Station for church. The town was alive with folks in their Sunday best. She could feel all the eyes on her as she walked toward the little white church. The whispers started before she even got to the door. Inside, she took a seat in the back. Martha Jenkins gave her a slight nod from across the way. After the sermon, as Clara headed for the wagon, a sharp voice stopped her. "So, you're the widow?" 3 women stood there looking her up and down. "I'm Clara Whitmore," she answered. "We heard," said the sharp-faced one. "Living out at the Brennan place, with all them men." "I'm the cook," Clara said, feeling her back straighten up. That's what they all say, another one snickered. The familiar shame started to rise in her, the same judgment she'd faced back in Philadelphia. But she wasn't that same woman anymore. I am the cook, Clara said again, her voice clear and strong. I make 3 meals a day for 15 hard-working men. What I don't do is stand around spreading gossip about folks I don't even know. The woman's face turned beet red. Clara turned on her heel and walked away, her heart hammering in her chest. Then she heard Martha Jenkins' voice cut through the air. Leave her be, Edna. That woman's got more grit than half the men in this town. A small bit of warmth spread through Clara. Maybe she'd found a friend. That very night, there was a knock on her cabin door. It was Jake holding his hat in his hands. He'd never come to her cabin before. Mr. Brennan. Miss Whitmore. I heard about what happened in town, he said. Word gets around. It's a small town, he said, looking uncomfortable. You shouldn't have to put up with that on my account. I put you in a bad spot. You gave me a job when I was at my lowest. That's not a bad spot, Mr. Brennan. That's a lifeline. For a second, the hardness in his face softened. You can call me Jake, he said. Most folks do. All right, Jake, Clara said with a small smile. Then you can call me Clara. Clara, he said the name softly. I came to ask you something. About dinner tomorrow night at the main house. To discuss ranch business, he added quickly. You mentioned the ledgers. I was hoping maybe you'd take a look. Clara's heart skipped a beat. You want my help with your books? I want your opinion. Hector says you're good with numbers. I handled my husband's store accounts for 8 years. Jake nodded. Then maybe you can tell me what I'm doing wrong. These books say the ranch ought to be making money, but it sure don't feel that way. Clara knew what it must have cost that proud man to admit that. I'll be there, she said. 7 o'clock. 7 it is. He put his hat on, gave a slight tip of the brim, and was gone. Clara leaned against the closed door, her mind buzzing. This was it. This was her chance to prove she was more than a cook, and she wasn't about to let it slip by. She'd never been inside the main house before. It was bigger than she'd thought, but a deep silence hung in the air. Furniture was covered in dusty sheets, and the curtains were all drawn tight, as if the house had been holding its breath since Lizzie died. Jake led her to the dining room. A simple meal of beef and potatoes was on the table. I can cook, he said, seeing her surprise. Just not very well. Well, it is better than what your last cooks made, I suppose. A hint of a smile touched Jake's lips before vanishing. They finished their meal in a heavy quiet. Clara watched him when he wasn't looking, taking in the lines etched around his eyes and the silver at his temples. His hands moved with a steady purpose, the mark of a man used to being in charge. Finally, Clara broke the silence. The ledgers you mentioned. Jake pushed his chair back and rose. Follow me. His office was a storm of paperwork, just as she'd pictured. Ledgers were piled precariously and bills were tangled with letters in a chaos that only he could navigate. She grabbed the closest book. What she saw inside made her gut clench. Jake, when did you last balance these books? He just frowned. What are you getting at? Clara put one ledger down and grabbed another. Your numbers are all wrong. The money you say is coming in does not line up with what is going out. And look here, she said, pointing. This supplier billed you twice for the same delivery. Over here, you are paying top dollar for feed that should cost half that. A shadow fell over Jake's face. Someone is swindling me. Clara met his gaze directly. How long has this been going on? I have no idea. Could be years. Jake raked a hand through his hair. I am a rancher, Clara, not some bookkeeper. I put my trust in the folks I did business with. That word, trust, hit Clara hard. She remembered Edmund and all the trust she had misplaced in him. Let me help you, she offered. I can sort through this mess. I will build you a proper system to track everything and find where the money is leaking. That is not the job I hired you for. You hired me to make your life easier, she countered. Well, this will make it a whole lot easier, unless your pride will not let a woman help you. The challenge hung between them. Jake's jaw was set like stone. For a second she thought he might send her packing, but then he let out a long breath. Fine. Do what you have to. A genuine smile touched Clara's lips. Thank you. Do not thank me yet. You have not seen the worst of it. I have seen worse, she said quietly. Jake stayed silent for a good long while. I am sorry you had to go through that, he said at last. Do not be. It taught me things I had to learn. Clara started making neat piles out of the chaos. It taught me I could get through anything, even the deepest betrayal, even losing it all. My husband's gambling debts were hidden for years, she explained. He cooked the books and forged papers, lying to everyone, especially me. After he died, I spent 3 months untangling that disaster. By the end, I could smell a phony number from a mile away. Is that why you came out to Kansas? To get by? Clara paused. I came to Kansas because there was nowhere left for me to go. I stayed because... She looked around the messy office, at the ranch sprawling outside the window, and at the man beside her. Because I found something worth staying for. Jake's face gave nothing away. I should let you get to it, he said. I will be in the barn if you need me. He was gone before she could answer. Alone in his office, she felt a change between them, something she was not yet ready to put a name to. A few hours later, Clara had a clearer picture. The ranch was making good money. In fact, it was thriving. Jake's cattle operation was solid and his horses were prized. He should have been one of the richest men around here, but his profits were being drained by 1,000 tiny cuts. And then she found one entry that made her blood turn to ice. She found Jake in the barn, brushing his horse in the lantern light. We have to talk. Her tone made him stop his work. What is it? That supply merchant in town, Henderson's Mercantile. What about them? Clara held out the ledger. They have been overcharging you for 3 solid years. It started small, but it has added up. By my count, you have paid them nearly $400 more than you owed. Jake's face hardened into a mask. That is not possible. I have known Harold Henderson for 10 years. Then you ought to go have a word with him because these numbers do not lie. Jake took the ledger, and his expression grew stormier with every line he read. Son of a gun. I might be wrong, Clara said gently. You are not wrong, Jake snapped, slamming the book shut. I trusted him. What are you going to do? Tomorrow I am riding into town. Harold Henderson is either going to give me an explanation or I will get one out of him. Be careful, Clara said, touching his arm without thinking. A cornered man like that can be dangerous. Jake glanced down at her hand and she quickly pulled it back, a blush creeping up her neck. I will be careful, he said softly. Thank you for this. You are welcome. They stood in the quiet for a moment. It is getting late, Clara finally said. I ought to head back. I will walk with you. You do not have to. I want to. They walked in comfortable silence under a sky full of impossibly bright stars. At the door to her cabin, she turned to him. Thank you, Jake, for giving me this chance. His features softened in the dim light. You have already helped more than you know, Clara. He tipped his hat and walked back into the darkness. Clara watched him go, a strange flutter in her chest. She went inside and leaned against the door, trying to make sense of it all. She had come here just to survive. She had not counted on him. She definitely had not counted on the way her heart jumped when he looked at her. As she lay in bed that night, staring up at the ceiling, she knew it was already too late. Something had begun that she could not stop. The next morning, a letter came. Billy, the ranch hand, brought it to her during breakfast, a worried look on his face. It arrived on the morning train, ma'am. Looks important. Clara's hands shook as she took the envelope. The handwriting was all too familiar. Silas Crawford. She had hoped that running all the way to Kansas would be enough to make him give up. But Silas never gave up, and he never forgot a debt. She tore it open with unsteady fingers. It said, "Mrs. Whitmore, I know exactly where you are. I know about your new cooking job and the rancher you work for. You cannot hide from what is owed. I will be seeing you very soon, S.C." A chill washed over her. He was coming. The man who had ruined Edmund, the man who had helped him gamble away their entire life, was on his way. The letter promised a visit from Silas Crawford, the man who had taken everything she owned and still wanted more. Clara glanced at the cookhouse filled with cowboys who had become her family. She saw Billy's worried gaze and Hector's easy laugh. She had built a real life here, something worth fighting for, and she would be damned if Silas took this from her, too. Folding the letter, she tucked it deep in her apron and got back to her duties. For 3 days, she kept her secret, her heart hammering every time a rider approached. Then, on the 4th day, Jake came home with news. Henderson had confessed. Jake stood in the doorway, covered in dust, but with a look of grim victory. "I laid your numbers out for him," he said. "He tried to lie, but the proof was plain as day. The sheriff took him in this morning. Turns out he was stealing from half the county." A wave of relief washed over Clara. "That's because of you," Jake said, stepping closer. "You saw what I missed for years. You saved this ranch." Their eyes met, and a current passed between them, silent and strong. "Boss," Billy yelled, bursting in. "Hector needs you at the north fence." "Rustlers, maybe." Jake's face hardened. He turned at the door. "Stay inside. Lock up till I am back." She nodded. "I promise." The cowboys rode back at dusk, tired and empty-handed. "Just a cut fence," Hector said over coffee. "No cattle gone. Probably just some drifters." "Or someone testing us," Jake said, his voice low and hard. Clara felt a chill. The letter in her pocket felt heavy as a stone. "Testing us how?" she asked. "Seeing how fast we react," Jake answered. "I am putting extra men on watch tonight." She knew she should tell him right then, show him the letter from Silas. But she could not. She had worked so hard to earn his respect. What if he saw her as just more trouble he did not need? So Clara said nothing, and keeping her mouth shut was the biggest mistake of her life. The 4th of July came on a wave of blistering heat. Clara baked a dozen pies through the night for the Brook Station town picnic. Apple, peach, cherry, and pecan. "Are you coming along, ma'am?" Billy asked as they loaded the wagon. Clara hesitated, the memory of the gossiping women at church still sharp. "Go on," Hector urged gently. "Let them see the real you." So she did. The town square was buzzing with families and music. Clara set up her pies, and in an hour every last one was sold. Folks she had never met came to praise her baking. "You are a sensation," Martha Jenkins said with a grin. She pointed toward a sour-faced woman by the lemonade stand. "Edna Thompson's bone-dry cookies are not selling so well, I see." Clara almost felt a little sorry for her. Almost. As a band started a waltz, Clara felt a familiar ache watching the couples dance. "May I have this dance?" She turned to see Jake holding his hat and looking mighty uncomfortable. "Hector told me to ask. He is usually right." Clara could not help but smile. "Then yes, you may." He led her onto the floor, his big hand finding her waist with a surprising gentleness. He was a clumsy dancer, concentrating hard on not stepping on her feet. "Relax," she whispered. "Half the town is staring at us," he muttered. "Let them," she said. "I do not care what they think." "Neither do I," he answered. For a moment the music and the crowd just faded away. When the song ended, his hand stayed on her waist a second too long before he walked off. Martha sidled up, grinning from ear to ear. "Well now, looks like our widow has a new admirer. Honey, that was more than just a dance. That was a declaration." Jake Brennan has not given another woman the time of day since Lizzie passed. Their working evenings soon became something else entirely. Over the ranch ledgers, they started to truly talk. They shared dreams and fears they had told no one else. Jake spoke of his wife, Lizzie, and the fever that took her so cruelly. "I was out checking the fences for a storm," he said, his voice thick with old pain. "By the time I got home, it was too late. She died in my arms." Clara reached out and took his hand. He flinched but did not pull back. "It was not your fault, Jake." He was quiet for a long time. "I have not been able to talk about her for years." "Why now?" he wondered aloud. "Because you make me feel like I can." Her heart hammered in her chest, but instead of pulling away, she told him everything about Edmund. She spoke of the gambling and the lies and the slow, daily cruelty of his words. "He never laid a hand on me, but his words left their own kind of bruises. By the end, I believed I was worthless." Jake's grip tightened on her hand. "You are not invisible," he said, his voice fierce with emotion. "You are the most remarkable woman I have ever known." Clara felt tears welling in her eyes. Back the tears. "Jake, I'm serious. You came here with nothing but pure grit. You made this whole ranch better. You earned my men's respect. And you—" He paused, his throat tight. "You made me feel something I thought was gone for good." The air between them was thick with unspoken words. Clara knew she should put a stop to it, remind him she worked for him, and save herself the heartache. But then Jake leaned over his desk and kissed her. It was a soft, hesitant question, and she answered him right back. The next morning, Silas Crawford was waiting for her in the cookhouse. Clara stopped cold, her heart pounding in her chest. He looked rougher than she remembered, all skin and bones. His clothes were dirty from the road, his face was covered in stubble, and his eyes were bloodshot and mean. "Hello, Penelope. My name is Clara now." "Your name is what I say it is," Silas sneered, showing his yellow teeth. "You were hard to find. It took me months." "How did you get past the gate?" "I told them I was an old friend. They bought it. You look good, Clara. This ranch life suits you. Tell me, does your new boss know about your dead husband's debts?" "Edmund's debts died with him. The court in St. Louis said so." "Courts don't know a thing," Silas said, pulling a folded paper from his coat. "I have notes here signed by Edmund promising me $500. That debt belongs to you now." "Those are forgeries. Can you prove it?" Silas's grin got wider. "I have folks who will swear they saw him sign every one, and my lawyer will make them sound mighty convincing." Clara's hands were shaking, so she balled them into fists. "What do you want, Silas?" "My money." He leaned against the stove, looking both lazy and dangerous. $500 in cash by the end of the week." "I don't have that kind of money." "Then get it from that rancher you're sweet on." Silas's eyes gleamed. "I see the way he looks at you. I bet he would pay a lot to keep you out of a mess." "Go to hell." Silas moved like a snake. He grabbed her wrist and twisted it until she cried out in pain. "You listen to me. I didn't come all this way for nothing. You get me that money, or I will tear down everything you have built. I will tell this whole town about Edmund, his gambling, his debts, and the kind of woman who would marry him." His grip got tighter. "When I am done, you will not be able to show your face in Kansas. Let me go. $500. End of the week, or this new life of yours is over." He let her go and walked out without a second glance. Clara just stood there, her wrist aching and her mind spinning. She knew she had to tell Jake, to warn him about Silas before it was too late. But then she saw Jake riding in, looking relaxed and almost happy. He saw her and gave her a real smile. The words caught in her throat. She could not be the one to wipe that smile off his face. She could not bear to see the trust in his eyes turn to doubt. She would have to handle Silas on her own. Forcing a smile, she went to meet him. 3 days went by in misery. Clara did her chores, cooked the meals, and worked on the books, pretending like everything was fine while Silas's threat hung over her head. She thought about running away in the dead of night, but she just could not do it. She could not leave Jake without a word. She could not give up the life she was building. On the 5th day, Billy ran to get her. "Ma'am, there is a fella at the main gate asking for you." Clara felt her blood run cold. She walked to the gate by herself, telling Billy to stay back. Silas was waiting, a bottle in one hand and a lit match in the other. "Time is up, Clara. I told you I do not have the money." Well, I guess we will have to do this the hard way. The flame danced in his eyes. That is a nice chicken coop. It would be a shame if something happened to it. Silas, please. Now you are begging, he laughed. I like that. Edmund would have loved this. Edmund was a monster, just like you. Silas's face contorted with fury, and he threw the match. Clara screamed as the coop burst into flames. Ranch hands came running from all over. In the chaos, Silas grabbed Clara and dragged her toward the barn. You think you can just start over? You are nothing, Clara. You are a dead man's debt, and I am here to collect. She fought him, scratching and kicking, but Silas hit her hard across the face. She tasted blood. Stop! Jake's voice cut through the noise like a whip. He stood 10 feet away, his rifle aimed steady, his eyes full of murder. Let her go, now! Silas just laughed. Or what? You will shoot me in front of everybody? Try me. Clara saw Jake's finger tighten on the trigger. She saw a man who had already lost too much and was ready to kill to protect what was left. Jake, no, she choked out. He is not worth it. If you kill him, they will hang you. Just then, Hector stepped up behind Silas and pressed a pistol to his head. Drop her! Silas's hands flew open. Sheriff is on his way, Hector said. He saw the smoke from town. Silas made a run for it, but Jake tackled him in 3 steps. They rolled in the dirt, trading punches. Jake landed a solid hit that snapped Silas's head back. Then another. Jake, stop! Clara grabbed his arm. You will kill him. Jake froze, looking down at Silas's bloody face, then at his own knuckles. He was breathing hard, his eyes wild. He hurt you, Jake said, his voice raw. He put his hands on you. I know, she said, touching his cheek to make him look at her. But it is over now. When the sheriff arrived 20 minutes later, Silas was arrested for arson and assault. As they took him away, he screamed threats that carried on the wind. Clara watched him go, feeling strangely light. It was finally over. That night, Jake came to her cabin. We need to talk. Clara sat on her bed, still trembling. I know I should have told you about Silas. I was just so scared. Scared of what? That you would send me away. That you would look at me differently. That you would think I was just trouble. Jake crossed the room and knelt in front of her, taking both her hands. Clara, look at me. Your past could be 10 times worse, and it would not change a thing. How I feel about you is about who you are right here, right now. Tears streamed down her face. Jake, I love you. I love you too, Jake said, his voice thick with emotion. I never thought I would say those words again after Lizzie died, but you brought me back to life. Clara's heart was pounding. I am scared, she whispered. Scared to trust, to believe, to lose it all again. Then we will be scared together. Jake kissed her hands. I am not asking for perfect, Clara. I am just asking you to be you. Let me love you. Can you do that? She looked at this stubborn, broken, and beautiful man who had given her a second chance, who saw her strength instead of her weakness, who fought for her. Yes, she said softly. Yes, I can do that. He pulled her into his arms, and for the first time in a long, long time, Clara felt like she was home. The next morning, Clara woke up to find a small bunch of wildflowers on her doorstep, tied with a bit of twine. She knew they were from him. At breakfast, Jake acted like it was just another day, talking business with his men. But every now and then, his eyes would find hers across the room, and that was all the note she needed, across the cookhouse. Every time he did, a warmth bloomed in Clara's chest. Billy was the first to say something. Boss has a new spring in his step, he mentioned, helping Clara with the dishes. Almost looks happy. People change, Billy. Not him. Not in the 5 years I've worked here. Billy shot her a sideways glance. Something happened between y'all, didn't it? Heat crept up Clara's neck. Mind your own business, He just grinned. That's a yes, then. That evening, Jake asked her to take a walk. They followed the creek that gave the ranch its name, the water glowing in the sunset. After a long, comfortable silence, Jake finally stopped. I meant every word I said last night, Clara. Her heart beat a little faster. I know. I want to court you proper, he said, turning to face her. I know it is complicated with you working for me. Folks will talk, but I don't give a hoot what they think. I only care what you think. Well, she looked at this man who had given her a chance when she had nothing, who saw her strength when she only saw her weakness. I think, she said softly, that I would like that very much. A real smile spread across Jake's face, changing his whole demeanor. He took her hand, and they walked back to the ranch. Being courted by Jake Brennan was nothing like she had ever known. Edmund had used pretty words and false promises. Jake used actions. He brought her wildflowers each morning and fixed the squeaky hinge on her cabin door without her asking. He started coming to the cookhouse early just to spend a few quiet moments with her. One afternoon, he walked into her kitchen with flour on his hands. Teach me to make biscuits. Clara just stared. You want to cook? I want to understand the things you love. So she taught him. She stood by his side, her hands guiding his, laughing when his first batch came out lopsided but still good to eat. Not bad, Clara admitted, taking a bite. For a man who's never tried. High praise from the best cook in these parts. Flattery will get you nowhere, Mr. Brennan. It got me a biscuit lesson, Jake grinned. Soon enough, they were playfully tossing flour at each other, laughing until their sides ached. And when Jake pulled her in for a kiss, she tasted flour, coffee, and something that felt an awful lot like happiness. It took the cowboys less than a week to figure it out. By Friday, the whole ranch knew the boss was sweet on the cook. Clara braced herself for mockery, but instead the men were thrilled. It is about damn time, Hector said, clapping Jake on the back. We were starting to think you forgot how to smile. You are all fired, Jake said, but the wide grin on his face gave him away. That night, sitting by the fire with Jake's arm around her, Clara listened to the men's stories and felt, for the first time, like she truly belonged. 3 weeks after Silas's arrest, Clara came to Jake with an idea. I want to expand the ranch. Jake looked up from his books. How? Horses, she said, showing him her notes. You already have good stock. If we focus on quality, not just numbers, we could get a reputation for the best working horses in the state. Jake studied her figures, his eyebrows raised. You have really thought this out. The numbers work, Jake. We have the land and the know-how. We just need to be willing to take a chance. Everything worth doing is a risk, he said. You took a risk on me. He was quiet for a long moment, weighing the idea against his cautious nature. Finally, he nodded. Let us do it. Really? We do this together, he said, kissing her forehead. As partners. Partners, Clara agreed. It was a word that fit them perfectly. One humid August morning, Sheriff Thompson came riding out. When Clara saw him from the cookhouse, her stomach turned to ice. She knew it had to be about Silas. She watched through the window as Jake met the sheriff in the yard. A few minutes later, Jake walked in, his face grim. Silas escaped. The word struck Clara like a blow. What? How? Broke out last night. Knocked out a deputy and stole a horse. Jake's jaw was set like stone. The sheriff thinks he is headed south, but he wanted us to be on guard. Clara started to tremble. In case he comes back here. He will not. You do not know that. I know that if he sets one foot on this ranch, I will kill him myself. Jake's voice was cold as steel. He hurt you, Clara. He put his hands on you. Men like that do not stop. They only understand one thing. And if you kill him, they will hang you, she pleaded. What good would you be to me then? He fought back his rage. I will not let him hurt you again, he said. Whatever it takes. Then stay alive, she whispered. Stay with me. He pulled her into a tight embrace. I am not going anywhere, he promised. But that night, she lay awake, startled by every shadow. Silas was out there, and she felt a terrible certainty that he would be back. As August cooled into September, there was still no word. The sheriff had nothing new to report. Silas had simply vanished. Clara tried to focus on the ranch and on Jake, but she could not shake the feeling of a storm gathering on the horizon. Jake saw the worry in her eyes. "Talk to me," he said one evening. "I'm just so worried about Silas. The sheriff will find him. And if he does not? What if he comes back and hurts someone I care about? I brought this trouble to your door, Jake." "Stop," he said, taking her hands. "Whatever is coming, we face it together. That is what partners do. You are not a burden. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me." He made her meet his eyes. "Silas is one man. We have 15 cowboys and a whole community that would ride for us. He cannot touch us if we stand together." Clara wanted so desperately to believe him. "I am scared," she admitted. "I know," he said softly. "I am scared too. But you have taught me something. Fear does not have to win." He kissed her then, a gentle promise of strength. Whatever was coming, they would face it as one. The attack came on a moonless night late in September. Gunfire ripped through the darkness, jolting Clara from her bed. She was dressed and armed in seconds, her heart pounding. Through her window she saw flickering torches and men shouting in the yard. Outside was pure chaos. Cowboys scrambled for their guns, horses screamed, and flames began to climb the barn wall. In the middle of it all was Silas Crawford. He had brought 3 other men with him, and they were firing at anything that moved. "Where is she?" Silas roared. "Get me the woman!" Clara raised her rifle. Her hands were steady. Her aim was true, but before she could pull the trigger, "Fire!" Jake came out of nowhere. He tackled Silas clean from behind, sending them both tumbling to the dirt. Silas's pistol went flying as Jake's fist found his face, once, then twice more. When one of Silas's hired guns took aim at Jake, Clara fired first. The man crumpled with a cry, grabbing his shoulder. The blast made her ears ring, but she was already loading another round. The last 2 men took one look at her, at the rifle in her hands, and decided they were better off running. Hector and Billy took off after them while the other cowboys scrambled to fight the barn fire. Clara just stood there, watching Jake beat Silas senseless. "Jake, stop!" she called out, but the rage had a hold of him. She dropped the rifle and ran, pulling on his arm with all her might. "Stop it! You're going to kill him!" His fist stopped in midair. He looked at her, his eyes wild. "He came for you," Jake rasped. "He came to hurt you. And I'm all right." "I'm right here," Clara said softly, touching his cheek. "Come on back to me, Jake." The fury in his eyes finally gave way to something else. "I thought I lost you," he whispered. "You didn't," she promised, pulling him into a hug. "You won't." An hour later, the sheriff had Silas and his crew all tied up and ready for a long stay in jail. The next morning, Jake found Clara in the cookhouse making breakfast just like any other day. "You shot a man last night," Jake said quietly. She didn't look up. "I did." "First time?" "Yes." He paused for a moment. "How do you feel?" Clara thought about it. "I feel like I did what I had to do," she said at last. "To protect you, to protect this ranch, and everything we've built here. You saved my life." "You've saved mine more times than I can count," she said, finally meeting his eyes. "That's what partners do, isn't it?" He crossed the room in 3 long strides and took both her hands. "Marry me, Clara." She just stared at him. "What?" "Marry me. Tonight, tomorrow, I don't care when," Jake said, his eyes burning with a fire she'd never seen. "I've wasted too much time being stubborn and afraid to see what was right here in front of me all along. I don't want to waste another single day." "Jake, this is all so sudden." "It isn't sudden. It was meant to be from the moment you stepped off that wagon." He held her hands tighter. "I love you, Clara. I love your strength, your stubbornness, and how you always take on more than you should. I want to spend the rest of my life showing you that loving me wasn't a mistake." Tears started rolling down her face. "I have conditions. Name them. I'm not just a wife. I'm your partner. In the ranch, in the business, in every decision. Equal say." "Done," he said without hesitation. "And I want it in writing. My name on the deed. I'll get the lawyer on it today. And," her voice trembled, "I want you to promise me this is real, that you won't wake up one day and see me as a burden." Jake lifted her hands and kissed them. "I promise. I will spend every day of my life showing you how wrong you are about that. You are not a burden, Clara Whitmore. You are a miracle." Clara laughed right through her tears. "Then, yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you, Jake Brennan." He whooped and spun her around the kitchen until they were both dizzy and laughing, completely forgetting about the breakfast burning on the stove. "Now let's go tell the men," Jake said, kissing her forehead. "Billy is going to lose his mind." And Billy surely did. He hollered so loud the horses in the corral spooked. He lifted Clara right off her feet and swung her around, then shook Jake's hand so hard Hector had to step in. "I knew it," Billy crowed. "Told Hector from day one she was going to change everything." "You did not," Hector said calmly. "You said she'd last 2 weeks, tops." The other cowboys gathered around with big grins and handshakes, promising to get everything cleaned up for a proper wedding. The wedding took place on a warm September afternoon. Clara wore a beautiful cream-colored dress she had stayed up late for 2 weeks sewing herself. The little church in Brook Station was filled to the rafters with cowboys and townfolk. Hector walked Clara down the aisle. "You sure about this?" he whispered. Clara looked at Jake waiting at the altar, his hair combed for once and his eyes full of a tenderness that stole her breath. "I've never been more sure of anything," she said. Hector just patted her hand and led her forward. The ceremony was short and simple. When Reverend Whitley asked if anyone objected, Billy yelled, "Lord, no!" so loud the whole church busted out laughing. Jake's hands trembled just a bit as he slid the ring onto Clara's finger, his voice steady as he spoke his vows. "I, Jacob Theodore Brennan, take thee, Clara Josephine Whitmore, to have and to hold from this day forward." Tears slid down Clara's cheeks as she listened. For better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part. When the Reverend finally said they were husband and wife, Jake kissed her like she was the only person in the world. Clara Whitmore was now Clara Brennan, and life was starting fresh. The party at the ranch lasted all night long. Jake danced with Clara under the lantern strung across the yard. "Happy?" he whispered in her ear. "Terrified," she admitted with a smile. "And happier than I ever dreamed I could be." "Good," he said, "because I plan on spending the rest of my life making you even happier." That first year of marriage had its tests. They were two strong-willed people learning how to truly be partners. They argued about cattle prices and how to fix a fence, but through it all, they were building a life together. Lying in Jake's arms in the big house that was now their home, Clara finally felt a deep sense of peace. She was home. "I have run this ranch for 12 years. I know what I am doing." Clara's voice was steady. "Then why did you hire me to fix your books? Why did you ask for my help to expand?" Jake's jaw set like stone. "That is different." "How is it different?" "Because those are your skills. The cattle are mine. There is no yours and mine anymore, Jake. There is only ours. That is what being married means." They stared at each other, two stubborn souls in a silent standoff. Finally, Jake let out a long breath. "You are right." Clara looked up, surprised. He raked a hand through his hair. "I am not used to this." to having someone who questions me, someone whose thoughts matter as much as my own. He looked her straight in the eye. I am going to make mistakes, Clara, a whole lot of them. But I am trying. The anger just melted right out of her. I know you are. She reached for his hand. We will figure it out together. Together, Jake agreed, his voice firm. They learned that a partnership was not about never having a fight. It was about finding your way through the storm, together. Spring brought new life to the ranch, and with it a quiet hope. Clara stood in her vegetable garden, a patch of land she had brought back from nothing. Rows of tiny seedlings were pushing up through the dark soil. You have worked a miracle here. She turned to see Jake leaning on the garden gate, looking at her with that expression she had come to cherish. It was a look of pride and love and a little bit of wonder that she was really his. It just needed some care, Clara said softly. Everything grows if you give it what it needs. He walked toward her and pulled her into his arms. Speaking of growing things, Clara's heart gave a little jump. She had held her secret for 2 weeks, a precious gift just for them. Doc Morrison mentioned you came to see him last Tuesday. Jake's eyes searched hers. Why did you not tell me? I wanted to be certain. Clara took a deep breath. I have never been able to before. Edmund told me I was broken. Jake's face hardened. Edmund was a fool. I know. But that kind of fear does not just disappear. She laid a hand on her still flat stomach. What if something goes wrong? Jake covered her hand with his own. Whatever happens, we face it together. That is the promise we made. A few tears slipped down Clara's cheeks. You want this baby? I want everything with you, Clara. Babies, grandkids, the whole works. I want to grow old with you and watch our family grow all around us. Clara laughed through her happy tears. Well, then, I suppose we had better build a bigger house. The first few months were rough. A terrible sickness kept Clara in bed, and she was losing weight instead of gaining it. Doc Morrison was a frequent visitor, his brow more worried each time. You have to eat, Jake would plead, offering her broth she could hardly look at. I am trying. Try harder. If she had the strength, she would have laughed. You are a terrible nurse. I am a terrified husband, he said, his voice raw. There is a big difference. Hearing the fear in his voice, Clara squeezed his hand. I survived, Edmund. I survived losing my home. I survived Silas Crawford and traveling across the country with only $4 in my pocket. I will not be defeated by a little morning sickness. For the first time in weeks, Jake truly smiled. Stubborn woman. You married me, she reminded him, and that was the best decision I ever made. The sickness finally broke in the 4th month. Thinner, but as determined as ever, Clara threw herself back into her work. Samuel Jacob Brennan was born on a cold, snowy morning in 1884, after 18 long hours of labor. When the baby's first cry rang out, Jake burst through the bedroom door. He stopped in his tracks. Clara was propped up on pillows, exhausted but glowing, holding a small bundle in a blue blanket. She looked up at him, tears of joy streaming down her face. Come and meet your son. Jake sat on the bed, his hands trembling as he looked at the tiny face. He had dark hair and hazel eyes, a perfect little copy of Jake himself. He is perfect, Jake whispered. He has your stubbornness too, Clara said with a weak laugh. Tried to show up early. Jake gently touched the baby's cheek, and the little hand grabbed his finger with a surprising strength. He will be a rancher. He will be whatever he wants to be, Clara corrected softly. Thank you, Jake said, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you for giving me a reason to fight. Our family is a little strange, she said, listening to the cowboys cheer outside. Our family is perfect, Jake replied, and she knew he was right. The years that followed were the happiest of Clara's life. She watched Samuel grow into a boy who shadowed his father's every move. In 1886, twin girls, Caroline and Elizabeth, arrived. They looked exactly alike, but were as different as night and day. Caroline loved numbers and the ranch office, while Elizabeth loved the open range. A 4th child, Thomas, was born in 1889, named after the young cowboy who had become a brother to them. Billy cried at the honor, and this time he did not try to hide it. The ranch flourished under their joint care. The horse breeding program that Jake once had his doubts about became their biggest earner. Clara even started a cooperative for other ranch wives, which grew into a successful business that helped families all over the county. Martha Jenkins, once a rival, became her closest friend and partner. "You have built an empire," Jake said one evening as they sat on the porch. "We built it," she corrected him. "You had the vision. I just provided the land and the muscle." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. "It takes both to make an empire grow. It is a partnership, remember?" How could I ever forget? Their 20th anniversary was a beautiful September day, just like their wedding day. The children, now nearly grown, planned the whole party. Samuel, at 19, handled the guests. Caroline managed the money. Elizabeth organized a riding show, and 10-year-old Thomas was in charge of desserts, which meant he ate about half of them himself. The entire county seemed to show up. Neighbors, cowboys, and the whole town of Brook Station came to celebrate with them. Hector, his hair now white, still played his fiddle. Billy, a senior ranch hand with a family of his own, danced with Clara until Jake stepped in. "That is my wife you are hogging," Jake said with a grin. "She was my friend first," Billy shot back. Jake pulled Clara close. "And she is my wife forever." "Then go dance with your own wife," Clara laughed as Billy went to find his partner. Jake pulled her in close. 20 years, he murmured. "Can you believe it? Some days feel like 20 minutes. Others feel like a lifetime. A good lifetime or a bad one." Clara looked up at her husband. His hair was mostly gray now, and his face was lined with the years. His hands, though still strong, moved a bit slower, but his eyes were the same, full of that quiet fire that had won her over from the start. "The best lifetime," she whispered. "The only one I ever wanted." He kissed her while the fiddle played a sweet tune. 20 years of building a life, 20 years of love, and Clara knew she would do it all over again in a heartbeat. Jake passed on a peaceful spring morning in 1912. Clara discovered him in his favorite chair by the window, gazing at the sunrise over the land they had nurtured together. He went without any pain, the doctor assured her. Just a good life coming to a natural close. Clara did not weep at the funeral. She stood tall and steady by his grave, her children and grandchildren around her, a pillar of strength and grace. The heavy crying happened later, all alone in the room they had shared for 30 years. After Jake passed, Clara Brennan lived for another 15 years. She kept a firm hand on that ranch, refusing to let go of the reins until she was well past 70. Her children thought she was a stubborn old mule, but her grandkids, well, they just adored her for it. Her grandson, Samuel Jr., once asked her, "Grandma, how come you never married again?" Clara gave him a warm smile and said, "Honey, I already had the greatest love of my life. When you've had the best, why on earth would you settle for less?" He asked if she ever got lonely. She thought about Jake's empty chair by the window, and all the time she turned to tell him something. "Sometimes," she admitted softly, "but being lonely is not the same as being alone. I have my family, this land, and my memories. And one day, I'll see him again." And that boy, he carried those words with him for the rest of his days. Clara passed on a summer morning in 1927, surrounded by her family. She was 91 years old. She arrived in this place with just $4 and a broken heart, and she built an entire world. Her last words were a whisper for Jake. "I'm coming, darling. I'm finally coming home." They buried her right next to him on the hill that looked out over their land. The headstone told her story plain and simple. It said, "She came to cook and ended up running everything, including his heart." And just below that, a little line read, "Partners in everything, together forever." The Brennan Ranch thrived for generations, a legacy started by the woman who came with nothing and built it all. Theirs was a love that took two broken people and made them whole. It was a partnership that proved what can happen when two stubborn souls decide to face the world side by side. Clara Whitmore came to the Brennan Creek Ranch looking for a cooking job. She found so much more than that. She found her purpose, a family, and a love that could overcome any obstacle and last longer than a lifetime. She came to cook for his ranch hands, but she ended up running the whole outfit, his heart included. And it turned out his heart was exactly where she had always belonged. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.